So before we start today's video, I would like to make a couple of announcements. The first, I made a guest video for Grim Jim, link to the video and his channel in the description, where you will find comments like this. Delightful. Second, I got this comment recently and I thought it was rather amusing, so I talked about it briefly on a stream I did on Friday. I will leave a link to the stream. I had considered starting this video with a 45-second clip of just me slurping a drink. It's not lip smacking, by the way, it's simply me going, ah. That is not, nor will it ever be, lip smack. Thirdly, it was suggested to me that I ask for assistance in trying to acquire this that was linked to me on Twitter, and a couple of people very kindly donated to me on Streamlabs. If you're at all interested in helping me do this, I will leave a link to that in the description. Along with that as well, it is quite nice. Looks nice. Yeah. Anyway, today's video is going to be covering Telford, a statement made by the CPS, and a couple other injustices that I think are related. So let's dive right in. Prosecutors told 13-year-old Telford grooming victim's family they couldn't prosecute because she had consented to sex. This statement alone from the Daily Mail, and I know you don't like the Daily Mail, most of you don't, I don't, but that title sums up the CPS statement we are about to address. This assessment is made after reviewing the evidence obtained by the police during the course of their investigation, because we want to totally trust the police now, right, don't we? I'm assuming this will totally negate any factors that include race of perps, because the police are totally afraid of being called racist. In assessing this material, I must also consider the likely issues that would be raised as part of the defense case. The excuses, yes. In this case, we concluded that there was insufficient evidence to prosecute. Well, imagine my shock. It is necessary for me to refer to some of the evidence in this case in order to explain the decision, and I apologize if the details I'm about to provide cause you any further distress. Your apology means fuck all to them. The defense that was put forward in this case was that Blank willingly met the suspect and had consensual sexual intercourse with him. Of course he will say that, because he's the defendant. I'm not saying listen and believe the 13-year-old girl, but this is about child grooming. He's going to make every excuse he can to make you question her integrity. He, an adult, is going to use every excuse he can to make you think that a 13-year-old made an adult decision, which is what we're now going to talk about very briefly. You see, in the United Kingdom we have these things called laws. Most importantly, consent law. You have to be 16 to have sex, and this is where inconsistencies arise. He believed that she was 16. That's not to say she didn't lie to him, but this is in relation to grooming, so we know that's not the case. You have to be 16 to have consensual sex. He did not have consensual sex with an adult. He committed statutory rape to a minor. And before any law student now jumps into my comments and is like, oh, nuance this, nuance that, fuck off. I don't really have the time for you, sorry. I want to focus on this and be a little outraged that my country is actually this embarrassing. Your inaction and your ways of going about upholding the law only reinforce the right even more, because they're willing to call it out, and they suffer the consequences for it, which they shouldn't do. Their actions should be enough, really, but unfortunately the only voice that seems to be willing to call this out is on the right, and it's quite sad. Now, the reason we have consent laws, the reason anyone has a consent law, is because we do not believe a child can make an adult decision. Now, I wish this was the case and people properly abided it when I was in secondary school. Of a class of 200, 60% of that were female. 2/3 of them got pregnant before they left secondary school. I'd say 15% were before they were 16. It was quite bad. It was enough of a reason to scare me from even considering hooking up with any of those girls back then, because I didn't want to be a deadbeat dad or to have kids that would live on benefits, which was one of the main incentives some people had kids. But I have digressed, and I will moan about that another time. Also, that at the time this took place, the suspect held a reasonable belief, so he didn't know for sure, that Blank was over the age of 16. I know young people do like to try and look older than they are, but unless they have some form of ID, perhaps it's not such a good idea to fuck them. I can't be the only person that thinks this. I've seen the 2 video statements that Blank provided to the police, and I would like to thank you both for agreeing to provide these. It must have been a very distressing experience for Blank, and it's not easy to go through the matters again in order to provide a statement to the police. There are a number of potential charges to consider. I have firstly addressed my mind as to whether an offence of rape has been committed. It has. In law, it says you have to be 16 or over. Now, I know we have inconsistencies in this. For example, let's say you have 2 teachers, one male, one female. Both of them have sex with a student that is 15. One of them will go to prison. The other one will be told they have mental issues. Take a guess who goes to prison. In order for someone to be convicted of an allegation of rape, the prosecution must prove that a victim was not consenting to the sexual intercourse, and in addition that the person accused did not reasonably believe that the victim was consenting. Do I have to now restate the fact that this is rape regardless, because consent is irrelevant when under the age of 16? I know there'll be another law student in there telling me, nuance this. I would just honestly go away, please. In this case, the prosecution must be able to satisfy a jury so that they are sure that the sexual intercourse as described by blank took place without her consent, and also in addition that the suspect did not have a reasonable belief that she was consenting. Whether she said yes or not, and under whatever conditions that she said yes or not, it is utterly irrelevant. This is why I don't like this inconsistency in the law, or how people practice it, or how people go about obtaining evidence. The one baseline fact from this is that she was 13. The argument of consent is moot. I need to consider the last part of this legal requirement very carefully. I therefore need to look to see if there is any other supporting evidence to assist us in proving this element of the offence. The very fact that the, quote, consensual sex took place and the fact that she was under 16 is enough of a reason, since both are willing to admit that the sex took place. You now have the age part. I'm sorry, but this is not consensual sex. This is why we have consent on it. Children can't make adult decisions. And all you are doing here is reinforcing the idea that the police, the government, and law enforcement don't protect the actual victim. In her statements to the police, she was clear that although she may not have wanted sexual intercourse with the suspect, she agreed to do so, and the suspect would not have been aware of their actions at the time that she did not want to have sexual intercourse with him. As such, a charge of rape would not be appropriate. I'm going to resist the urge to any kind of moral outrage. I know people think about it, and it is certainly there in my mind, but quite frankly, I'm done with this. We all know this is wrong. In 2020, when I rule this world, I'm going to end this. I'm going to end all of it. But I will be wearing a tentacle blanket by then. So the next thing, and kind of the last thing, since we're on the subject of ad-friendly rape, I want to cover is the Director of Public Prosecutions, Alison Saunders, has been told to stand down. While at the Crown Prosecution Service, she oversaw the successful prosecution of Stephen Lawrence's killers, but recently has faced criticism after several rape trials collapsed due to evidence not being disclosed. Now, I have covered these particular cases, and in all of them, it came down to the fact that the evidence was considered too personal. This is the same country that let a girl off because they considered her an academic genius or a student of high potential, some neurosurgeon, but was actually a cocaine addict. You're kidding me, right? I'm not letting a cocaine addict anywhere near my brain. She said it had been a decision to leave the role and that criticism of her work at the CPS was incredibly inaccurate and hugely insulting to the service's staff. Well, that's interesting, because if these happened on your watch, they tarnish your reputation. The buck stops with you, and I don't want to be that guy, but at the same time, if this is happening on your watch, you are to blame. You have allowed people to make these decisions where innocent people go to jail, or could potentially go to jail, or have the stigma of being a rapist attached to them. That is a stigma that will live with them for the rest of their lives. It's not something one can simply hide from. The CPS faced criticism when in December 2017 the trials of Isaac Itery, who was accused of raping a child, and Liam Allen both collapsed when new evidence came to light. Withheld evidence, right? Police and prosecutors are expected to disclose evidence that could assist the defense case or undermine the prosecutions, but these cases demonstrated that evidence was not being shared early enough. In some cases, not until the very final day. It's later emerged, or 2 years later. The number of prosecutions in England and Wales that had collapsed because of a failure to disclose evidence had increased by 70% in the previous 2 years, which is a statistic you don't want to be carrying. I'm sorry to say this, but I don't know what procedures you introduced, but clearly there is some bias here, and this bias has led to very harmful practices to be allowed to creep into the CPS, in that evidence is not being disclosed and trials are being prolonged for years, ruining people's lives because they are being led to believe that someone thinks they're a rapist. And we know for a fact you haven't prosecuted anyone that actually made the false claim. You wouldn't want to waste that precious money you'd spend on donuts, right? Because you need those donuts so you can totally ignore all the grooming gang activity going on. And just as a final thing about the CPS. The CPS had enough evidence to prosecute Lord Janna over claims of historical child sex abuse, but it was overturned by an independent QC, but decided not to proceed with it because it was not in the public's interest. Are you kidding me? This is what I think of the law. If you break it, you serve your time. You are prosecuted and you serve your time. I don't care how old he is. I don't care how long ago it was. If you have the evidence to put someone in prison for a crime that is as heinous as the crime he committed, then you bloody well do it. Because it is your job to. Your inaction means that people are well within their rights to have little to no faith in you. You are as bad as the Metropolitan Police. You are as bad as the cops that arrested Dankula. You are as bad as those college campuses in America that think due process shouldn't be allowed. The ones that basically abuse Title IX to the point where students' lives are put in limbo, or are expelled, suspended, thrown out, only to later be found to be totally innocent and end up suing you into the ground for it. Which I think people should start doing here, honestly. If I can find something more cheerful for a Wednesday video, I think I will. Maybe a response video to something quite funny. But for now, I'm going to leave you with a clip to sum up what I think about the CPS, the police in the United Kingdom. So I hope you all have a lovely day, and thank you all for listening.
These are people of the land. The common clay of the New West. You know. Morons.